Hello, and welcome to an after-action report for Combat Mission. This is a battle versus a human opponent. I'm up against RichieRich, and it's a scenario battle called Myth of Invincibility in Red Thunder, which covers the Eastern Theatre during World War II. It's basically the Russians versus the Germans. It's my first foray into Red Thunder, and I thought I'd do a H2H rather than the AI. I've read through the Red Thunder manual, so have an idea on capabilities, but the battle that is coming up is very different to what I'd expected from the Russians. I'm commanding the Soviet 8th Cavalry Division of the 6th Guards Cavalry Corps, and we are continuing our advance post a successful Kishinev offensive. I'm to push deeper into Hungary against a Kampfer group of the 13th Panzer Division. Looking at my objectives, I have 4 locations to hold, 3 to touch, and I'm awarded points for enemy casualties on armour and infantry separately. Total available victory points are 1,250. I have no benefits to ensuring my division is fighting fit post the battle, so no victory points for my own casualties. I start in the east of the map and have to advance west. It's a meeting engagement type of scenario, and the briefing states the Germans have similar objectives. I have a large force to command. A brief overview is a guards tank regiment, an assault gun regiment, an AT gun battery, and reinforcements of a T-34 company and an assault gun company, both with an infantry platoon. What this means is I have around 21 T-34 85mm medium tanks, accompanied by a company of Tanks Guard infantry, equipped with mostly the PPSH submachine guns. I have 12 Su-76Ms with 76mm self-propelled guns, accompanied by a company of tank guards, a platoon of sappers, and a recon platoon. Again, most of the infantry are equipped with submachine guns. I also have 4 76mm towed anti-tank guns. In total, I have around 450 fighting men and 30 armoured vehicles, so a sizable fighting force. I have no detailed information regarding the German forces. I have to assume they are comparable. There have to be Panthers, probably tank destroyers, and potentially Tigers. Infantry I expect to be similar in strength. My issue is I don't have any experience with the Russians. In the manual, it states they should be used en masse. If you'd send a squad, send a platoon. Use a platoon, send a company. What this actually means, I'm not sure. Plus, I'm concerned about trying to shove a company into the manoeuvring space of a platoon. Why would I bunch my forces together? Looking at the terrain, there are woods and elevation, but none of it is impassable to armoured vehicles. There is a river running through the AO. This is unfordable and can only be crossed at the bridges, making these choke points. There is also marsh on the western side of the river, in defilade, which is also impassable to vehicles and in many places infantry as well. There is high ground to the north, a kind of plateau with an avenue of approach to the west, which doesn't have choke points such as the bridges. However, it is elevated and possibly exposed. I have some good elevated areas where I believe I can achieve good hold down positions. However, much of this is on the tree line, which limits line of sight. The avenues to approach my objectives are exposed and provide little concealment or cover, though the defilade of the river, if I can get to it, could be a good position to hold and then advance north to take the crossing and the northern river touch objective. Strategy-wise, my biggest issue is the unknown performance of my Soviet soldiers. The T-34 has a good reputation in the internet world, so I assume it's okay here, but the manual's advice about massing my forces is in the back of my mind. With this, strategy-wise, I'm going to take it slow. I shall scout, try and keep my armour at range, and use the strength of the 85mm gun in hull-down positions. I have 70 minutes, which is ample time to traverse the distance between the east and the west, so it's all about the combat. Once I have an idea what my opponent will do, I'll adjust. This drives my plan, which basically means most of my assets are tasked in defensive positions with the infantry scouting. So, let's get to the battle. I start by pushing up my armour to their overwatch positions. The infantry ride the tanks, but there is no line of sight for the Germans at the moment. I've been caught before in Final Blitzkrieg. A hit tank with riders is a heavy loss, so I unload the riders with zero risk. My scouts start moving forward, whilst on my right flank I set up my towed AT. I have vague sound contacts in the western buildings, including armour, but no solid intel. My reinforcements start arriving, and they are tasked to my right flank, but ordered to use the road to avoid any risk of bombing. My scouts get a better overview of the battlefield, and I briefly spot some German armour. But it seems they've also started spotting me. I lose my first T-34 and take casualties on a towed gun. I continue to advance in the woods on my left flank, with a possible advance down a gully to the river. My scouts on my right, advancing on the open plain, have seen no contact, so I advance the rest of the platoon and task a platoon of T-34s to support the infantry. In the centre, I send 3rd Platoon to secure the grain shed objective in the open wheat fields. A few minutes on, and we spot more tank destroyers on my left flank. On my right flank, infantry from 2nd Platoon with overwatch by T-34s continue their advance. We're 15 minutes into the battle, and I'm close to securing 2 of the 4 Occupy objectives, and I've barely seen a German. I'm struggling to get my armour to see any of the German tank destroyers. They appear to have line of sight, but they can't spot the armour. My opponent is either very stealthy, or my Soviets are all a bit short-sighted. This is demonstrated when a 76mm towed AT gun spots a truck full of infantry for a full half a turn, but doesn't take a shot. I'm forced to area fire to try and cause some damage on any spotted Germans. 2nd Platoon continue to advance unopposed on my right flank, so I've redirected 1st Platoon, 1st Company of T-34s to provide further armour support. My forces continue to get fleeting spots on prime targets, but fail to fire. My probe on my left flank is pretty quiet. And I spoke too soon. We spot the culprit, a Pak 40 AT gun. I'm also starting to get some armour spots, mostly by 2nd Platoon T-34s who have advanced on my right flank. They spot a flak cannon, 2 Panthers, and finally a 3rd Panther on the move to cover my advancing T-34s on his left flank. I continue to area fire because my spotting is rubbish. Towed AT gun fires a shot and at last gets a hit on an empty truck. Woohoo. I get some further success and touch one of the crossing objectives, followed by a solid hit on a tank destroyer, penetrating the gunman port and hopefully destroying the gun. On my right flank, 1st and 2nd Platoon T-34s have advanced to the buildings at the end of the lane. Whilst in the centre we continue to put HE into the buildings north of the central bridge. My right flank advance gives me better line of sight, but I only destroy another truck. I lose a 4th T-34 whilst my 76mm self-propelled shells just bounce off the Panthers. I'm inching forward, but it's at a high cost. We're nearly 25 minutes into the battle, and I've lost 6 T-34s, and my only confirmed kills are trucks, maybe 1 damaged tank destroyer. My Su-76s are unable to penetrate the Panthers. They are slow to range and hit, and when they do, the shells just bounce off. My towed AT is the same, because it's the same gun. I'm using area fire to try to knock out the German towed AT and destroy buildings for better line of sight, plus I'm smoking up the tank destroyers on my left flank. All this is to try and support an advance down the creek to reinforce my infantry at the crossing. If I can, I'm going to try and push armour down the creek and across the bridge to the marsh road. It's in defilade to the western village, but I can then try and push on the central crossing and the buildings to the west. It's difficult because frankly the Soviets are poor quality. My forces are mostly veteran and regular, but their accuracy and reactions are far more like green troops compared to the western front. My soldiers at the river are isolated and getting jumpy. They're taking casualties but cannot advance because I do not have fire superiority, and they cannot return fire because of the short range of their PvP submachine guns. My guns are starting to get the range and hammer any panthers they can see, but 76mm fails to penetrate. I'm not necessarily doing much damage either. I'm able to advance my armour to reinforce the centre grain sheds. And start probing a T-34 forward to cross the river on my left flank. At last, my T-34s get a decent spot and shot on a panther. The first, a ricochet. The second punches through the side armour, as I continue to push down the gully on my left flank. are losses on both sides, but it's not in my favour. On my right flank, I start to push forward a platoon of guards. As the disabled T-34 that pushed over the river is finally knocked out, I put down the Panther that's covering the second bridge crossing. I want to move more soldiers down the gully and over the river, pushing forward to the second bridge. But the German infantry guarding the bridge are out of submachine gun range, so they have no firepower to push forward. I also continue to push my right flank, but my armour is pretty weak versus the Panthers and the Tiger. I've also spotted a King Tiger. After a few minutes, the T-34s start to get spots on my opponent's rear area, but the 85mm is struggling to penetrate. I order my guards forward, right into an excellently executed ambush. On my left, I push more armour and infantry over the river, and in the centre I send forward 3rd Platoon from the grain sheds to advance on the second bridge. We are almost 40 minutes into the battle, and I take a pasting on my right flank, losing 2 T-34s at the potato sheds and several guards as I try to exit the ambush to the west. In the centre, I'm almost at the main crossing, with support advancing on the left. I estimate I'm in a better victory point situation than my opponent, but I've taken heavier losses than I'm comfortable with. A quick reassessment and my course of action is clear. I shall reconcile the situation on my right flank and hold. I shall take the bridge in the centre and then steal the western touch objective with support from my left advance. I'll start to manoeuvre into defensive positions, dig in, and then offer a ceasefire. I push more forces on my left to hold the ground and support 3rd Platoon as they secure the bridge. The marsh is tough going. There's little resistance at the touch objective. I perform a section attack using suppressive fire. As I reconcile my left flank and form a defence, I agree with RichieRich on a ceasefire. He doesn't think he can counterattack and is unable to push for any more objectives. I get a major Soviet victory. The drivers were mostly a lack of objectives achieved on the German side versus the Soviets. It's worth noting the army sizes. This is classed as a meeting engagement, but the Soviets outnumber the Germans almost 2-1. Armour, again, the Soviets heavily outnumbered the Germans, but the equalizer here is the poor quality of the Soviet skills. I don't know if this is historically correct, but I'm starting to understand why the manual suggests mass tactics. This was my first battle with the Soviets. I'd say it was interesting and a bit frustrating. I need more practice to understand Soviet tactics better. I want to thank RichieRich. It was a tough battle which I enjoyed. I have more human versus human videos on the way, so don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll get the next video out soon. Everybody stay safe.